My brothers and sisters died in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he enabled that to happen. He enabled that to happen. He is disqualified. He is disqualified. No way he can be president. They are dead. Millions are dead in Iraq. He will not be allowed to be president. Disqualified. Trump is more anti-war than Joe.
Fucking bullshit. Fucking imperialist. We actually...
This gentleman was extremely upset at one Joe Biden. He was a soldier in the Iraq War. He fought in that war. And he was sent there by Bush, yes, but also by people like Joe Biden that was advocating and gyrating for that war. Regardless of what Joe Biden is saying now in regards to his lying about, being taken advantage of and whatnot, Joe Biden was a major proponent for that war going into multiple years after that war. It's one thing if you go into a war zone in order to fight to defend your country. I think anybody would absolutely entirely understand that. And having the capability of, again, defending your country when that's actually what's taking place. There are barbarians at the gates, and you grab your pitchfork and your sword and you go put your body on the line for your family. Understood. But what about wars of aggression? Which is what Iraq was. As he said, millions of people died in that war, meaning Iraqis, but also 4,000 Americans. Yes, Joe Biden was one of the main proponents of pushing that war. So you can understand that somebody who fought in that war, that Joe Biden pushed, that war of aggression, they may have some feelings with that, considering the harm and the toil that they had to go through, not to mention the people, their brothers, that died. We've had people run in this race who was the righteous avatar of that indignation. Meaning the soldiers themselves who had to fight in that war, who came back and thought, they sent me to a war zone where I didn't necessarily have to be in, and we need to stop these regime change wars. We had somebody in the race, Tulsi Gabbard, who was a strong proponent of that. Essentially, we need to stop these regime change wars. Syria was a regime change war, pushing for Julian Assange and issues of cutting down on these kind of knocking over governments. She was a strong proponent of that stuff. And because she was a strong proponent of that, she got a pretty decent, let's say strong following from lefties who backed her in this race. Tulsi Gabbard she got tacit approval from me. She stepped down in 2016 in order to back one Bernie Sanders. And this ostracized her from the Democratic Party. You've seen how they attacked her, this kind of fanatic devotion to going after her. It's rabid, almost to a religious fever in the way that they go after her. It's off the rails. But that's the way they've treated her ever since she stepped down in 2016. So in this race, in this year, the same thing was true. They absolutely attacked that woman the entire way through, and she was left to her own devices in order to fend for herself in the campaign. Tulsi Gabbard has just dropped out the race. Now, she has been going longer than anyone else with the exception of Sanders and Biden. And when everyone else dropped out the race, Tulsi Gabbard was still chugging along, going from state to state to state, with her devoted following still believing that she was going to somehow turn back the night. That didn't happen. Tulsi Gabbard has dropped out of the race. That Tulsi Gabbard comes out and puts out this video endorsing the warmonger that sent her to Iraq and got her on this particular trail, Joe Biden. Tulsi Gabbard is endorsing one Joe Biden. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. I don't know why this is so funny to me. It just is. I know what it is. I know why it's funny to me. So every so often, like I said, Tulsi gets my tacit approval. She stepped down. She backed my guy. I believe in accountability on this stuff. And if you back my guy, and I don't think you're onerous, then yeah, you're going to get my tacit approval because you did what nobody else would do. So that was always my default position with Gabbard. If it was something she said I didn't like, I would say so. If it was something she said I did like, I would say so. That's effectively where I fell. But there are a lot of other people. who didn't fall in that way, meaning they fell in a peculiar sort of way where they were all in. Anything that she did, it didn't matter, all in. And fair enough. That's not good or bad. Some people may say, I'm the same way for Sanders. I would disagree with them. There have been plenty of things where I've gone after Sanders on, even when Sanders was doing good, even when he was doing bad. There were plenty of things I went after him on. But besides the point, there are a lot of people who are going to be feeling a bit of heat right now since Tulsi turned around and backed Joe Biden. And I have to be honest, I've been scratching my head to try to figure out what the fuck is she thinking? Like, she ran her campaign on this notion of we need to stop these regime change wars. Great, fine. And in trying to stop these regime change wars, going after various candidates in the race, Kamala Harris for one, she tried to go after Warren at one point, on that very specific issue of warmongers. Great. She gets applause for that. So it's kind of peculiar that the person who's pushing against regime change wars and made that the centerpiece of her campaign gets out the race and then backs a guy who's for regime change wars. I don't understand that. Now, I know a lot of people have pointed out that Bernie Sanders is also going to turn around and endorse Joe Biden. That is absolutely true. And I would imagine they, to some degree, feel about her endorsing Biden as I am about Sanders doing so and promising to do so. But there's a small difference. Gabbard didn't have to endorse Joe Biden. She chose to endorse Joe Biden. She could have endorsed Sanders, and at which point Sanders got out the race, she would have just been stuck endorsing Sanders. I hope you understand what I mean. She wasn't necessarily forced. The last two people in this race, Sanders and Biden, and while I would have preferred that Sanders played hardball on this point and not guarantee his support without any kind of political concessions, it's Sanders. And he's a flawed man that makes mistakes, especially in regards to weakness, and this is what you got. I'm just saying there's a slight difference in this. She didn't have to do this, especially since the entirety of her campaign was based on this notion of principles. Every position and every stance I take is just based on principles. And now her principles has led her to making this particular video endorsing one Joe Biden. Again, the warmonger that sent her to Iraq.
Our nation is facing an unprecedented global crisis that highlights the inextricable bonds of humanity and how foreign policy and domestic policy are inseparable. We are all in this together, and we must all rise to meet this moment in service to our country and our fellow man. This is not the first time that we have faced adversity together, and it will not be the last. After the terrorist attack by Al-Qaeda on our country on 9/11, we stood together as Americans, motivated to serve, marshaling our forces to defeat our common enemy. I and so many Americans all across this country enlisted in the military to do just that. Likewise, today, as Americans and all of humanity, we face a common enemy. It is once again time as Americans and as neighbors in this global community that we stand together once again and work hand in hand to defeat this new enemy, the coronavirus. Throughout my life and throughout this campaign, my motivation has been to serve God, our country, and the American people as best I can. I feel that the best way that I can be of service at this time is to continue to work for the health and well-being of the people of Hawaii and our country in Congress, and to stand ready to serve in uniform should the Hawaii National Guard be activated. Now, after Tuesday's election, it's clear that Democratic primary voters have chosen Vice President Joe Biden to be the person who will take on President Trump in the general election. I know Vice President Biden and his wife, and I'm grateful to have called his son, Beau, a friend who also served in the National Guard. Now, although I may not agree with the Vice President on every issue, I know that he has a good heart, and he's motivated by his love for our country and the American people. I'm confident that he will lead our country guided by the spirit of aloha, respect, and compassion, and thus help heal the divisiveness that has been tearing our country apart. So today, I'm suspending my presidential campaign and offering my full support to Vice President Joe Biden in his quest to bring our country together. I will continue to advocate for a 21st century foreign policy, one that's based on mutual respect and cooperation instead of confrontation, where we as a community of nations can work together to overcome the great challenges that our people face, preventing and stopping pandemics like the coronavirus that is now affecting all of us, tackling climate change, combating terrorism, removing the existential threat of nuclear war that hangs over the heads of all of us. I will continue to do everything that I can to help bring about an end to the new Cold War and nuclear arms race and end regime change wars, which are costing us trillions of dollars, so that we can invest these precious resources in the needs of the American people. Things like healthcare, rebuilding our infrastructure, education, and so much more. I want to extend my best wishes to my friends, Senator Bernie Sanders, his wife Jane, Nina Turner, and their many supporters for the work that they've done. I have such a great appreciation for Senator Sanders' love for our country and the American people, and his sincere desire to improve the lives of all Americans. To the many people all across our country who've dedicated their time and energy and resources to my campaign, working tirelessly to help get our message out, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I look forward to speaking to you more in the coming days about why I made this decision and how we can continue to work together for our common cause.
And just like that, Tulsi Gabbard endorses one Joe Biden. Now, maybe the key to this mystery, if that's what you want to call it, maybe in the video, she kind of made this point that after the elections, it seems that the public has chosen Joe Biden and he's going to be the winner. So maybe she just looked at it and thought Joe Biden is going to be the person anyway, in which case she just chose Joe Biden. Maybe, I guess I look at it and think you had a choice. Like, even if you wanted to get out on a basic, somewhat of a technicality, yeah, you may end up backing Joe Biden at the end of the process, but at the very least, when somebody looks at you politically, they would see Tulsi Gabbard endorses Bernie Sanders. Now, whether or not Sanders in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or how many ever turns around and backs Joe Biden or not is irrelevant and secondary to the optics of endorsing Sanders as opposed to endorsing Joe Biden. That's the only way I look at it. And I think there were a lot of people scratching their heads like, what the hell just happened? There were a lot of other people who didn't particularly like Tulsi Gabbard all that much, who is chest thumping right now, because Tulsi Gabbard was always this kind of weird point of contention. You had burners like me who thought, I don't understand why people have animosity towards her. And because ultimately, again, she backed your guy. And if she backed your guy, to some degree, it looks like there would be a tacit approval, even if it's not necessarily support. And you had other people who thought she was a fraud. It was a weird mix. And the people who thought she was a fraud are out there chest thumping on Twitter right now. And the people who thought she was not, either in interviews and those type of things, well, they're out there kicking rocks right now. I don't know anybody that backed Tulsi that supports Joe Biden. I'll go further. I don't know anybody that backed Tulsi and would vote for Joe Biden. I hope you understand what I mean when I say, God, that's weird. I also started to think of it in terms of, is it because Sanders really didn't come to her rescue on some of this stuff? Like trying to get her on the debate stage. And when Cory Booker was out there screaming and begging for people to get on the debate stage, they jumped in. But from the standpoint of Gabbard, it just felt like through much of this race, she was by herself. I mean, whether it was the argument for Assange, whether it was the argument about Syria and the war stuff, it just seems like I looked at Tulsi through a Sanders lens because, I supported her tacitly. It wasn't necessarily, she wasn't my person. Sanders was my person. And I looked at her and thought, she gives Sanders room on the left on issues of war and foreign policy. So I wanted her on every debate stage because A, she's not hitting my guy. She's not like a Warren. She's not attacking my guy. And not just not attacking my guy, she credibly gives him room on the left because of how far she's willing to go and the things she's willing to say on issues of foreign policy. So to me, I love the fact she was on the debate stage. It was a win-win. So I don't know. It's funny, it's strange, but Gabbard endorses Joe Biden. And like I said, there are going to be a lot of people out there kicking rocks right now, feeling some kind of way. Ben Rowley, Nico's inside info says Bernie is going to do the same thing in a week or two. Tulsi just skipped to the end, so it is what it is. Yes, it is what it is. I love that. God damn it, I love that saying. That's honestly, we used to play chess at the barbershop. And I cut my teeth playing chess at the barbershop. We played for hours. And it was, as a kid, you get out of school, you stay there for the next, 4 or 5 hours. At some point, your mom comes to get you, or it's like, is my kid still there? It's like, yeah, my kid is still there. But at some point, you're playing, and something would happen. Let's say something just goes miserably wrong. And the guy's trying to explain what happened, and at the end of it, it invariably ends, it just is what it is. It just is. There's nothing else to say about it. It just is a thing. It just exists. Yeah, absolutely, Ben Riley. It just is what it is. Rev Barker, okay, you must have said something bad because that message was retracted. Jay Wood, I don't like this endorsement, but like Sanders, she said she'd endorse the nominee. Bernie's done, and Sanders never reached out to her. And if you watch the Jimmy Dore interview, you can tell it bothered her. So right there. That's what I was thinking, right? So that's what I mean when I say I wonder if it's like in areas where it looks like he would have lended assistance or lended, I don't know, even voice support. There just wasn't there. Like there was no reach out to the campaign in that way. And so that's very possible. And yeah, I don't blame her for being bothered by it, especially if, look, she stepped down in 2016. Now, again, that makes this all the weirder, which is why it wouldn't shock me if it was a situation of her thinking, he never reached out to me. And if he never reached out to me, why am I going to take that extra step of endorsing him? I think we think of this stuff a lot of time through ideological lenses. And, in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. These are still people. And those people are going to have certain grievances and whatnot, like anybody else. You have some people who can be above it all and function from this kind of purely ideological level as opposed to personal grievances. But that's not everybody. And if you think to yourself, well, he's just going to endorse Biden anyway, and he didn't do me any particular additional favors in this particular race, maybe, I'm not necessarily shocked by that. Rev Barker, she offered to Bernie, his campaign or himself didn't want it, still ignoring her. This according to Jai Gabbard. Are you serious? Are you serious? She offered to endorsement to Bernie. His campaign or himself didn't want it. I have to look that one up. Reeve, I have to look that one up. I mean, look, would you be shocked if Sanders was like, yeah, I totally don't endorse me. I'm about to get out anyway? No, I wouldn't be. That's a goddamn shame. This boosts her position in the Clinton lawsuit. You think so? Interesting, Luca. Oh, you're a cynical SOB, Luca. This boosts her position in the Clinton lawsuit. That's pretty goddamn cynical, Luca. That's pretty damn cynical. I don't know if or are you just saying, okay, are you saying it's just that's what it does, just as it is what it is? Or are you saying that that's why she's doing it? I don't know if she's doing it entirely for that. I need to look up what Rev Barker said, whether or not it was offered and Sanders or someone in his camp turned it down. I need to look that up. That's disappointing if that's true. Because, I was one of those people that wished he had reached out to her earlier in the campaign. She shouldn't have, look, if he could have somehow folded her into his camp, he should have did so. I thought that a long time ago. Jay Wood and the left and Sanders made it clear they didn't like her and they would smear her and attack her while Sanders just ignored her. But not everybody did that. That's what I mean. This wasn't a blanket thing. My channel didn't do that at all. And like I said, I've tried to get Tulsi Gabbard on this channel multiple times. There are some lefties that tried to get Tulsi Gabbard on their show, and apparently Tulsi Gabbard originally said yes, and then turned around and said no later on when he found out they were Bernie supporters. I've never had any issue with her. I guess that's my thing, right? Like, this is not necessarily an absolute. You're going to have lunatics. They just abound. They just are what they are. But in the case of support, I mean, I don't know. It would make more sense to me if it had something to do with either Sanders turning down her endorsement. It's like, no, I'm about to get out this thing myself, so I'm just endorsing. I'm going to endorse him in a few weeks. Or if it's him turning it down, or if it's one of those things if she just felt some kind of way that he didn't back her. I don't know. Maybe, and that's why I think this one is so weird to me. Because to take that step in 2016 and it's like, well, what changed from 2016 to 2020? This guy is, he's clearly against your interests in compared to the way you ran the campaign. So I would be curious to hear a little bit more of what was going on behind the scenes on this. Dilly out 357. Booker played the game. Tulsi was a loose cannon. Booker was out of this race within a few months on the stage begging for money and begging for people to essentially support him to keep him in the race. Gabbard even exceeded top-tier candidate Kamala Harris, who she effectively put out the race. I don't think Tulsi was a loose cannon. Look, a lot of people hated Tulsi for what took place in 2016. Meaning establishment Democrats hated her guts because she got out the race to back Sanders. And they hate his guts because he had the temerity to run against Hillary Clinton. Not to mention people realized that he probably would have won in 2016. So her hatred and the hatred towards her has just been absolutely unhinged. But I don't think she was a loose cannon. She was very specific on this issue of foreign policy, which I had no issues with. I actually liked. I think I've said on more than one occasion. In foreign policy, Tulsi Gabbard was my sword. She would make a position on most things, not on Kashmir, but on most issues of knocking over governments, she would say the things that I would like. But yeah, I'm curious on what went on behind the scenes on this one. I'm really curious of what went on behind the scenes. You didn't hear, but TYT, Majority Report, Pacman, Humanist Report, and most of the other subs definitely did. Now that's true. That's true. That's true. That's true. That's true. That is true. Now, yes, that's true. But see, I don't consider them surrogates for Sanders. I guess that's what I'm thinking. I mean, what is the difference between Sam Cedar, the Humanist Report, and any random person on Twitter? I mean, those aren't people who are affiliated with the Sanders camp. I know Mike, and I think Cedar backs Sanders, so don't misunderstand me. I just make a difference between, I guess, that and the support base. But maybe, you could be right. You could totally be right. Because all of those people definitely did not like her. They did not like her at all. Replay, DNC cheats Bernie, Bernie induces Biden. Yes. Unfortunately, Luca, yes. That seems like that's going to happen. And, I think I've said this before. It is quite possibly the weakest position you can take. It is the weakest position you can take. If, say for the moment, that Sanders really does believe that Donald Trump is a worse bet than Joe Biden. Let's just take that as an act of God, as an act of faith. And he thinks Trump is far, far worse than putting Biden in. Even if Biden is going senile, Trump is far worse than putting Biden in. What's the best way? What's the most ideal way to get Joe Biden over the finish line? If indeed you believe that, and if indeed you prefer to get Biden over the finish line and getting your support over to Biden, then how do you do that? How do you do that? And you going out there just telling people, hey, we need to put Joe Biden in, you are going to get booed. You are going to get booed again, just like you got booed in 2016. They're going to stand there for a minute and boo you. And guess what? They should. They should. They should absolutely do such. Now, the catch here, though, is those people are ideologically bent. There are certain policies that they want. They're not wrong in wanting. And this is not like, 2008, where the Democratic Party can stand up there and make the argument, nobody likes this stuff. No, you can't make that argument because you can look at the polling, because this guy was one of the most popular politicians in this country, and all of these policies were popular. So it's like you revisit that and you're like, well, no, I want these policies. You have certain interests that don't align with my own. And I don't get my interests if I continuously back yours. And so if you are the one that's supposed to have the philosophical responsibility of getting these items done on the left, and you're not doing that, and the right wing is not going to do it at all, I don't have any dog in the hunt. I'm kicking rocks. Now, if your name is Sanders, and you know that, which you should know that at this point, the only way you're going to get those people to back Joe Biden is if you were able to get political concessions from Joe Biden. That's the only way. And credible political positions, which is the rub, right? I mean, Joe Biden has flagrantly lied this entire campaign. And because he's flagrantly lied this entire campaign, I don't know how anybody can believe anything Joe Biden would say. And anybody can promise anything that's trying to effectively get into office. So there's that part. But assume for the moment that you can get some credible policy proposal, be it, I don't know, Medicare for all, Green New Deal. Let's just those two. Well, that's different. That's a different conversation. You're still not going to get your entire batch, but there'll be enough people or a lot of people that will be like, ugh, all right, I'll do that. But those are different conversations. In one conversation, you might have been conquered, and I would argue conquered because you're too weak to do what you needed to do to go after Biden, but whatever. But at the very least, you would have been able to get certain specific policy concessions that you yourself have wanted, you yourself have advocated for. And again, you won't get it all, but you will start peeling off the number of people in order to get what you want in regards to getting Biden in office. By not doing that, and I know that sounds like a ballsy, throwing your weight around, but if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get the people to back Biden, which is the issue, right? I mean, if you're going to go out there and tell people to back Biden and you don't have anything to show for it, they're not going to back Biden. And I strongly suspect that number is going to be higher in 2020 than it was in 2016. You have Crystal Ball, mainstream Democrat, Crystal Ball is basically saying, I'm not going to vote for Biden. I'm keeping my options open. Because she's come to the realization of what I've been saying going back for like 4 years, that basically your power in the political system depends on whether or not you are able to hold various people accountable in mass, meaning they don't get your support unless they're going to follow a particular policy plan. The left has bastardized itself by putting itself in the forever position of you have nowhere else to go, meaning you're not voting for affirmative policies. You're voting to keep the monsters at bay. And they have been able to cow you in this position and scare the shit out of you as opposed to actually doing things in the office. I mean, for fuck's sake, Nancy Pelosi, you have the Republican Party that just put out a bill for $1,200 a month. Pelosi and Schumer immediately attacked the president's plan saying, oh, it needs to be means tested. It needs to be means tested. So instead of getting the money out, you have the Trump administration with a policy to the left of the Democratic Party. Isn't that some shit? Now, does the Democratic Party act that way if you held that party accountable over the last 40, 50 years as opposed to blue no matter who? My point is, blue no matter who puts any random asshole in a position, not because of who they are, but because of who they are not. And if you're not putting somebody in there because of who they are, there will be things that person is doing in that office. There will be things that you need that person to do when you put him in that office. And yet, this is what you got. The guy who's not going to do anything because, again, he's there as a placeholder, not as an operational person. At the very least, not operational for you. It's a scam. That's my point. If you didn't just vote for any random Democrat, with Pelosi and Schumer, who knew their asses would have been on the line, would they have gone about denying that coverage, meaning denying or 20% of the workforce getting sick leave? I mean, 20%, think about that. Like how paltry and minuscule that is. And that's the party that's supposed to be on the left. You've incentivized that behavior by putting any random Democrat in. That's my point. I don't think I'm going to be alone in making that argument this time around. And it seems that there are some people who have started to, at the very least, come to the same conclusion. Just saying. Jay Wood and Ro Khanna and some of the surrogates of Sanders. Fair enough. You're right. which is kind of, again, I did say he ignored her. I mean, he seemed to ignore her in this race. So I can't necessarily begrudge her for it. One love, one heart. Tulsi's brother posted to a burner that she reached out to Bernie's campaign and said she would endorse him again, but the campaign refused her support. Wow. She should have did it anyway. She should have did that shit anyway. And understand why I say that. Because at that point, it's not about Sanders. At that point, it's not Sanders. It has nothing to do with Sanders at that point. At that point, it has everything to do with you and your political career and running in the race. Running in the race, you would... Look, your support was coming from the left and right-wingers. It's a weird mix. Because she was anti-war, and because she was anti-war, that cut both sides. The right-wingers, some of them, would have been willing to ignore some of the lefty stuff because of the anti-war stuff. So she had somewhat of an odd contingent of people. Part of that contingent, though, are lefties. And, you know, if you're going to go with a policy position of, I want to stop regime change wars, I don't care if Sanders tells me, no, I'm not accepting your endorsement. I don't give a shit at all, because it has nothing to do with Sanders at that point. It has everything to do with my political aspirations after this race. Dilliaw, 357, loose cannon, as in, they were afraid of what she would say. Yes, that's true. That's totally true. She destroyed Kamala Harris in one debate. They didn't want to put her the axe to anyone else. Yeah. You saw, there was one of those debates where she gets the opportunity to try to go after Warren, and the moderators kill that shit real quick. Like, ended that real quick. They was like, yeah, we're not letting that happen again. We're not letting that happen. All right, guys, I'm going to end this because I have one or two more shows that I want to do before tonight is over with, including one from TYT, where Cenk Uygur, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys in about 10 minutes.